Ryan, I've turned the controls over to you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you so much, Lisa. Let me just see if I'm able to advance the slides. Did you pass control over to me? I'm not able to advance anything at this point.
Try again now.
All right, looks like I am good to go. So thank you, Lisa, and good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of myself, my co-chair, Ruta Kue, and the other members of NACESFL's LinguaFolio committee, thank you for joining us this afternoon for this webinar and discussion. Those of you that have been around for a while know that LinguaFolio is a resource created by NACESFL that has long been at the forefront of our efforts to realize a vision where individuals are prepared for the demands of an interdependent world through intercultural competency resulting from being proficient in more than one language. You can see our organization's vision statement on the slide, and we hope it resonates with you this afternoon as we present our work up to date on the revitalization of LinguaFolio and seek your input this afternoon. Today's webinar is scheduled to last about an hour and a half at most. On this slide, you can see how we have loosely organized our time together this afternoon. During the first half of the webinar, we will present our committee's recent work on LinguaFolio, on its revitalization, as you heard me mention a moment ago. The committee has been working very diligently and is eager to gather your feedback on its work. So during the second half of the webinar, we are going to ask you to share your impressions and any guidance that you would like to give us. NACESFL products always turn out better when we focus our collective brain power on a task, and we hope today will be no exception. I'd like to take just, hold on a second here, I think I went one too far. We seem to be missing a slide. Let me go ahead twice and see if maybe they're just out of order. No, they're not. Well, we're missing a really important slide, so you'll have to forgive me here a second. The slide is a slide that pictures all of the various members of the LinguaFolio committee. So I'd like to just take a second then to introduce them orally, if not visually, to you. From the state of North Carolina, we have Helga Fasciano. From Nebraska, we have Ali Moeller. From Arkansas, we have David Nance. From West Virginia, we have Debbie Nicholson. From Virginia, we have Faye Rollins Carter. From Kentucky, we have Jackie Von Houten. Today, we have two guests from Castles. Actually, one is not a guest, one is a member of the committee, and that's Stephanie Knight, for whom we are so grateful to have her participation. And today we also have a special guest, Mandy Getler, who is going to be talking with you a bit later on in the presentation about the vision for the new and improved LinguaFolio Online. This hardworking team represents an ideal mix of dedicated NACESFL members with the skills and the dispositions to help keep LinguaFolio both relevant and useful for both learners and those educators who are helping to facilitate their learning. Some of us are original piloters from the early days of LinguaFolio, Others of us are newcomers to LinguaFolio who provide new sets of eyes. And of course, we're so fortunate to have a world-class researcher in Ali Moeller on board, someone who has not only conducted and written about a 5-year longitudinal study on the use of LinguaFolio, but who's also guided numerous graduate students in their subsequent research on various aspects of LinguaFolio. We are so very grateful for the continuing collaboration with Castles. As I mentioned, Castles has been so ably represented on the committee by Stephanie Knight. Together, all of these folks have been meeting on a monthly basis and sometimes more frequently to move this important project forward. And Ruta and I would just like to thank all of them publicly today for their continuing dedication to the committee's work. All right, turning to the current slide. During the previous 2018-2019 school year, the committee devoted its time to taking a hard look at the use of LinguaFolio over the last 16 years in the United States. Not only did we receive some great feedback via a survey that we administered to LinguaFolio users around the country, we also noted some of the important corollaries between our observations around the implementation and use of LinguaFolio here in the US and some of the causes for the demise of the European language portfolio across the pond. For those of you new to LinguaFolio, this was a European tool created by the Council of Europe on which our own LinguaFolio was originally modeled. As a result of our combined findings, we decided to focus our energies on ensuring that LinguaFolio continues to serve as a world-class learning tool to support learner autonomy in world languages and upgrading our use of embedded technology to support learners in their journeys. Today's technology is so much more advanced than it was when LinguaFolio Online was first created by Castles. So today you'll hear about the updated version of LinguaFolio, as well as some initial information about the new online platform that is being envisioned. We also will share how we hope to pay for all of this, because of course this type of enterprise does not come without a certain cost. So at this point, I'd now like to turn over the presentation to Dr. Ali Moeller from the University of Nebraska at Lincoln to share a brief overview of the research on LinguaFolio to date. Now, veteran members, we know you've heard this information before, but with so many new and successful members coming on board in recent years, we hope you'll be patient and stick with us for just a few slides while we bring our newest colleagues up to date on the rather stunning results that Ali's research on LinguaFolio has produced. Ali, are you on and can you hear me? And don't forget to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. All right. Great. Well, there's been a lot of talk about LinguaFolio and its role, and I think what we have to remember as when we talk about LinguaFolio, at the heart of that is, of course, goal setting, and when we put it within the context of LinguaFolio, what we're doing is personalizing learning and allowing students to really see their own growth in their ability to see what they can actually do or function in the language. And that seems to be one of the real issues that we're facing with language retention, is that students are saying they basically don't see that they're making much progress, that they feel that language teaching is seat time and a gatekeeper. And I think this is what LinguaFolio is trying to address, to actually allow learners to build that sense of self-regulation through very carefully structured can-do statements that are, of course, the leading element of LinguaFolio that allow them to set short and long-term goals. So when they set short-term goals based on where they want to be, basically what we're doing is really mitigating the anxiety that a lot of folks feel when they are in a language classroom. They can't understand how they're going to get there. LinguaFolio personalizes that, allows them to really choose how they're going to demonstrate that they can do an activity by allowing them to determine that, giving them options. Do I want to show this through a podcast? Do I want to show this through a written text that I've done or a skit that I've produced. The idea being that LinguaFolio is kind of the whole package. It's proficiency based in that students can, the idea is to take language learning outside the classroom so that they can actually document when they run into a native speaker or they listen to a movie or they hear a song that they really enjoy. They can actually immediately click on their cell phone, record their impression, come back, and actually see the usefulness of their actual language use. And so the idea here is, of course, to really bring language learning into the community, into every piece of what they're actually experiencing. And so when I did my 5-year study, I think we can go to the next slide, Ryan. There we go. The idea behind it all is really to, instead of making learners being kind of the victims of assessment, making them the users of assessment, that they actually become part of that learning process. So they're saying, long term, I want to be a bilingual lawyer, or I want to be someone who can go to a country and survive, and then see the short term steps that it actually takes, much like a marathon runner. I want to run a marathon. What are the steps involved? Short term, baby steps, and then actually seeing the results. In a marathon, you see it. In a language development, not so much. So LinguaFolio makes this transparent to the learner, to all the other stakeholders as well, and especially, of course, to the teacher, who can then figure out, what do I need to do to really allow this learner to get to the next step. And of course, most importantly, when you actually produce language, the idea behind learners is to see where their gaps are so that they fill that. And that's what LinguaFolio allows you to do. So we're trying to promote what we call autonomous or learning or self-regulated learning. And that was, of course, the whole idea behind my study, was to see, does LinguaFolio, and specifically within that goal setting, actually improve student learning and student achievement in speaking, reading, writing, and listening in the target language, in this case, Spanish. And that is, we did a 5-year study, most of you know that, with the same students, same teachers, 23 school districts. Can you go to the next slide? And those 23 school districts allowed me then to really follow them, and we used the stamp test because those were actual student samples. So we did a quantitative study from the raters, but more importantly, we had qualitative raw samples of students, of 1,250 students every year for 4 years. 1 year was a pilot study, and we actually looked at how they progressed in their speaking, reading, writing, and listening. And we discovered that there was a significance in all 4 of those particular skills. What was really interesting, and even more interesting, was to really realize when we did a motivation, we used a motivation instrument to really see how this impacted their motivation. They had a higher motivation, not only a growth in proficiency, but their motivation was higher, which meant their retention was higher. And we also noticed in a self-regulation instrument that we use, that their self-regulation was also significantly improved, as well as their language achievement at the level of 0.01, which means, translated, 99.9% of the time, these kinds of enhancements and these kinds of benefits really resulted when LinguaFolio was used consistently, and it was used over time. Okay, next one. So we then decided to try to see if this actually worked with college students. So we did a 1-year study, Nick Ziegler and myself, a quasi-experimental study with French and Spanish learners, and we noticed the same results: higher intrinsic motivation. They actually valued learning language, which of course, that is what we're trying to get at. When we see 8% of college students enrolled in foreign languages, this is the heart of what we're trying to get at, to really build that intrinsic motivation that they will want to not only enroll, but they want to continue to get to a significant level of proficiency. And again, I want to note that we really made sure that these teachers were integrating this regularly and frequently. When they didn't, the results were very different. Okay, next slide. Nick then got a Fulbright research scholarship to go to Germany, and we decided to test out the European language folio with 28 classrooms in 6 schools. And in order to see, is there a difference between the US and Germany? And of course, there are a lot of parallels with the European language folio. You know, this is where we've based our LinguaFolio upon. And we noticed that the higher task value, the way, which is interesting, this is what I thought was fascinating, they actually liked their teacher more, which, you know, that seems kind of trivial, but actually it has a ripple effect. If they like their teacher, more likely to continue within and to actually value what they're studying. They also reported a much more diverse use of learner strategies, which of course correlates with self-regulated learners. In other words, when they encountered difficulties, they had a repertoire of strategies that they could, at their fingertips, that they could use to overcome some of the challenges they were facing. And they actually rated the value of the European language portfolio much higher when it was used regularly and consistently. Okay. Next slide. What I was then curious to find out was, does this, the goal setting that is, of course, the essence of LinguaFolio, does this really translate across disciplines? So 3 schools gave me permission to look at the data of those students who did not have access to LinguaFolio compared to those that did have access. And so we used the ACT scores, we used their GPA, and we compared the results of a similar population and noted that there was significance yet again in that there was higher achievement in science, math, and literacy as on the group that, in the experimental group that actually used LinguaFolio. And again, it was hugely significant. It's the 0.001 level, which means, again, 99.9% of students that had LinguaFolio outscored their equal partners and peers in science, math, and literacy skills. And I think this has been underplayed a bit. I'm going to work with Dema Clark and see if we can't get this out there more. In other words, what we're contributing as language educators essentially is we are providing a foundation for them to become self-regulated learners that has shown in a quasi-experimental study to improve not only their language skills, but indeed their science, math, and literacy skills. Next slide. Okay.
So this is Ruta. I will continue the continuing saga of LinguaFolio. So again, we'll ask our veteran members to be patient for a slide or two so that we can explain or refresh the memory of all of our participants today where all of this came from. And NSSFL owes a great debt to the Council of Europe and especially to the Goethe Institute, who financed trips for 3 groups of NSSFL members between the years of 22 and 24. And on those trips to Germany, what we learned about was, first, that you see thing on the slide is the Common European Framework of Reference, and commonly known as the CEFR.
Oops.
Which is akin to our, but what we noticed about the CEFR that was different from the actual descriptors was that first, they were written in ICANN statements, and they were written for learners and not for assessors. And that body of work was translated into the Common Scale of Reference, which is akin to the actual proficiency scale. So instead of having novice all the way up to distinguished, they have a system of A1, A2, all the way to CT. But what really caught our interest was this idea of the European language portfolio, because it was, for the first time, an instrument that we saw that was fully in the learners, under the learner's control and for the learner. So if we go to the next slide, let's talk about this ELP, because this was really the inspiration for LinguaFolio. So as you can see, there were, and there still are, for those who are using it in Europe, the three parts: the biography, the passport, and the dossier. So as you can see on the slide, that there were, within each of these three parts, there were many moving parts. There were different documents, probably the part that was used the most, at least in the United States, was and still is the dossier, because that is where learners are putting up their evidence, as Ali described. They hear a conversation, they whip out their phones, they record it, and they upload it. The passport was designed to be, as its name suggests, something that you would take when you go to see an employer or an institution of higher learning or another school. So what we found, and we will go to the next slide, is that in Europe, this became a little bit too unwieldy. There were too many things going on. And what we found in the survey that we did with our LinguaFolio users here in the US is that all of these documents required an awful lot of time to implement. And teachers were saying, well, we don't really have time to do all of that. And even though the instrument is technically not for teachers, we know that teachers have a hand in guiding learners through the process. And the other things that we saw and that we heard from users was that it's not that simple to use, in the sense that it requires, especially on the part of facilitators, to have a solid set of skills in backward design and learner autonomy, goal setting, language proficiency, the ICC statements, which are fairly new. And so the users, especially the facilitators, were telling us that they were at a loss how to juggle all of this, and they did not know whether they were always giving meaningful feedback to the learners, which is a critical part. So next slide, please. So I will segue to Jackie. So who will explain, so why should we, even as an organization, still be interested in LinguaFolio, even if we update it? Jackie, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Ruta. The relevance of LinguaFolio to our users and our educators has to be tied to the standards. All of us know in education that if we do anything, it needs to have relevance or alignment with our standards, our national standards. Our world language standards are traditionally not specific, but when they were refreshed, they became at least a bit more specific in their expectation for learner performance. As we can see with the communication and cultures, which is where we're focusing at LinguaFolio, the verbiage changed. It became more detailed in what was looked for, that we would be able to, in the presentational mode, inform, explain, persuade, narrate. We talk about the audience to whom we are going to do this, that things are going to be interpreted or analyzed, that we're going to have written or spoken conversations, the interpersonal. And then in the intercultural, or in this sense, cultures standard, we're talking now about using language to investigate those products and practices, and not just that product and practice, but how that relates to the perspectives of the cultures that we're studying. So with this more detailed, more specific approach to the standards, it allowed for a closer alignment to the proficiency guidelines. Next slide. And so when we went to deconstruct the standards, we thought, of course, of the can-do statements that existed in LinguaFolio and that had existed in the CEFR. these were aligned to the proficiency guidelines. We have here the culture standard and the communication standard because recently there's been sort of a revelation that everything we do with language has to be in a cultural context. That way we don't talk about cultures on certain days or certain periods of a class, and we don't use English for discussion of cultures. We embed everything. We integrate cultures into language because they are inseparable. And this really gives the educators a purpose and a reason to validate that. So thinking about the can-do statements, we see again a more specific alignment. So when you look at the can-do statements as deconstructions, you see that in the intermediate, you can go to the next slide now, in the intermediate benchmark, we're looking for people to make comparisons between products and practices versus identify in the novice level. And so again, that alignment with the proficiency guidelines, which follows through then from the standards. And with the individual statements, these statements are where learners are going to set their own goals and where they're going to self-assess. They're not going to be, as you know, specific to a curriculum. They're going to be examples that are provided for learners. And so in LinguaFolio, when we have can-do statements, this gives an example for the learner to use, but it also suggests what they might be doing. And it shows them how to write or create their own goals. It also shows them the difference between what goals would be at the novice level, novice high, novice mid, at the intermediate level, and again, the various sub-levels, taking it more specifically to the language and then to interculturality. With the intercultural can-do statements, we're seeing them used for a variety of purposes. And so LinguaFolio can be used for learners in elementary, and middle, and high school, and college, and beyond in life. The same for the examples that are provided in the can-do statements. On this page, I don't know if you can see some of these or not, but one example would be in my own and other cultures, I can compare how people express time. Of course, everyone does this in a language class, but also express time and think about it in similar or different ways. How do people consider time? That's getting to that interculturality, the perspective. And then with interaction, I can consider socially appropriate times and punctuality when inviting someone to go out informally. So inviting suggests using language, but you're doing it in an appropriate manner because you're thinking about how people think about time. So you're embedding it in that intercultural context. All of this carries through to LinguaFolio and makes it very relevant for our students to use to set their own goals and to self-assess. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. And building on what Jackie said, because I think Jackie makes a really solid case for the continued existence and revitalization of LinguaFolio, thinking not only about the standards and their relevance in our work and to learners, but also in thinking about the other aspects of autonomous learning, which includes goal setting, reflection, demonstrating learning, and so forth. I think as we go on today, there shouldn't be a doubt in your mind that LinguaFolio really does or can continue to play an important role within the greater picture. At our last annual meeting, we shared the committee's new framework for LinguaFolio with an accessible membership, a framework that provided a foundation for LinguaFolio's creation and which has guided its use ever since. We were very grateful in New Orleans to have had an initial opportunity to gather that initial feedback, and our committee took some time back in the winter to understand the feedback and has been using it ever since to help guide our subsequent efforts to update and revitalize LinguaFolio. As a reminder, here is the graphic that we presented last winter. this graphic summarizes the cycle of autonomous learning. This piece was actually a major part of every presentation any of us ever gave about LinguaFolio. And when it came time to kind of think about what the new LinguaFolio might look like, it really didn't take the committee much effort at all to decide that framing LinguaFolio around the reflective learning cycle would be the very, very best idea that we could pursue. For each of the framework's 4 domains, those domains are goal setting, strategy selection and use, demonstration of learning, and reflection. The committee has been working to develop 2 how-to resources. One of those resources for learners featuring kid-friendly language, and the other designed for use by learning facilitators. These documents are currently being finalized and animated to capture the interest and motivation of users. Today, we're actually going to showcase some examples of these animated resources from the strategies domain. In just a little bit, committee member David Nance from Arkansas will give you a glimpse into the prototype for the strategies resources as they have been animated. I think you'll find this to be quite interesting and exciting. After much debate, the LinguaFolio committee decided to keep the tool's original name, LinguaFolio, but we also decided we wanted to highlight the autonomous nature of the tool's new design and focus by tagging it with the phrase personalized learning powered by LinguaFolio. We hope that this name resonates with you as well as it does with all of us. So, personalized learning powered by LinguaFolio. One of our takeaways from our time with all of you at the annual meeting last November was the notion that we must continue to try to make as many LinguaFolio resources available to the public for free as possible. While there's no way to offer access to the complete online platform for free for obvious reasons, the committee is dedicated to making as many of the framework's resources available to the public for free as possible. So on the left side of this slide, you can see the documents that, as of right now, will be available at no cost on the LinguaFolio page of the Necessful website once they're finished and have been fully vetted. On the right side of the slide, you see the online version of LinguaFolio, which will utilize the latest and greatest technology to integrate all of the LinguaFolio resources into a user-friendly online tool to help build learners' autonomous language learning abilities. All right. At this point, I'd like to invite David Nance to join us. David, you'll need to unmute yourself. Okay, there you go. So I'd like to turn the presentation over to David, who is our colleague from the Arkansas Department of Education, and he's going to tell you a little bit about the tool and the process the committee has been using to create animated versions of our new resources. And additionally, David's going to give you a sneak peek at what this will look like. So David, take it away.
All right, so I think you guys have kind of told everybody already that these are just kind of animated versions of the documents that we're working on. And so we started with the strategies document, the one for students and the one for teachers. And we're using a website called Beyond, which used to be called GoAnimate, if anybody's familiar with GoAnimate. It's the same thing, but they've changed their name to do that. And so on the next slide, I believe we have links to these 2 videos, right, Ryan?
Yes, we do. In fact, we're going to ask Lisa to put these up in the questions panel or in the chat box if they aren't there already. If everyone would take a look at whichever means you have to communicate, whether it's the questions pane or the chat pane, you'll find these links listed there.
Right, and so we're going to give everybody a minute to take a look at those. Each video is only about 1 minute long.
And so, David, what we're doing is we're asking everyone to copy the link out of the pane and then to put it in a browser and take a quick look at it. Is that my understanding?
Right, I believe that's right.
Great.
Okay, so I just now saw the links come up. I don't know if everybody else is just now seeing them, but yeah, again, you should be able to. You'll have to copy that link and paste it in, get rid of the brackets around it, paste it into your browser.
And just a reminder to everyone, if you're having trouble copying and pasting, you can also use the control button and the letter C, holding them down together. That will copy the link after you've highlighted it as well, if you're not able to right click and copy. If everyone would, after you have finished viewing the videos, if you would use the raise your hand function just to let us know that you have finished, that might be helpful. That way we'll know to move on.
And I'm not sure I can see who's raising their hand, Ryan, so you may have to.
Actually, I think Lisa, as the conference organizer, is probably the one who can see all the hand
Okay.
raising.
Okay.
So we will defer to Lisa, and she can let us know when she sees the majority of our attendees today with their hands up.
I see all but 2.
We'll just take a little more time then to give them a chance to finish before we start them. So the rest of you, thank you for your patience while we finish up with this segment.
I think you're pretty good to go. We're down to just 1 person.
Excellent. David, do you want to conclude your remarks?
Okay. Yep. So you saw slight differences between the two. The one that's intended for students, we had a real person record the audio for that, and we used that person's voice. We're planning to do that for all of them, but we haven't had the chance yet to put the real voice in. So we've got the computer generated voice in the second video right now. But that's kind of the gist of it. And Stephanie kind of wrote the storyboards for these videos, and then all I'm doing is plugging the things into Beyond and kind of following her instructions for that. Anything else, Ryan, that you wanted me to mention about this?
No, we're grateful to the two of you. You guys are working together as a great team. Stephanie is our script writer and you as our technician here. As you can see, I hope people are finding these to be favorable. Of course, these are just little snippets to give you a feel for what the finished product will look like. Obviously, there's a lot of work that will go into finishing the documents and finishing them for all 4 of the parts of the framework, but you guys are off to a great start, and we're really happy that you were able to give us some idea of the interactivity we can expect in these future resources. So thank you.
Yeah, happy to do it.
All right, then let's move on, and I would like to invite Mandy Getler from Castles to join us. Mandy, don't forget to unmute yourself. And if you would, once you've unmuted yourself, if you would just start off by introducing yourself to our members so that they get to know you. And just thank you from the LinguaFolio committee for joining us today. We're very grateful for your participation.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. For folks who don't know, my name is Mandy Getler. I'm the Associate Director for CASTLES, or the Center for Applied Second Language Studies at the University of Oregon. And I'm here on behalf of Stephanie Knight, who sends her regrets for not being able to attend today. I know that she enjoys and appreciates working with you all on the LinguaFolio committee. Let's see, can we move to the next slide, please? Yeah, thank you. So the current version of LinguaFolio Online was launched in 2008 as a partnership between Necessful and Castles. And there's been progressive refinement in that online platform since its initial release and inception. Most recently, we did kind of a redesign of the look and feel about 4 or 5 years ago. Currently, LinguaFolio Online allows learners to engage in reflective practice. Learners are, much like the paper-based version, encouraged to set their own learning goals, which are tied to the Necessful Actual Can-Do statements, and then learners upload evidence to showcase their skills. One large limitation of the current platform is that learners have to be guided through the reflective practice externally. So most often that's with a teacher, but it could also be with an informed parent if LinguaFolio Online is being used in a non-classroom setting. We recognize that we want to use technology in a way that empowers learner autonomy, and that there are changes in best practice in digital design that will allow us to do that. Could we shift to the next slide, please? Thank you. Our goal for enhancements to LinguaFolio Online fall into 3 broad categories, and using the user interface and principles of that digital design and really leveraging that to our advantage, the platform will more explicitly direct learners through components of the reflective cycle. So this means that learners have the opportunity to be truly autonomous, which is a large goal for LinguaFolio. And rather than requiring a teacher to prepare wraparound curriculum or activities to scaffold learners' use of the tool, learners will themselves have the means to understand that reflective process on their own and how to engage in it. Secondly, we'd like to include explicit language learning strategies organized by mode of communication and intercultural strategies. And so these learning strategies help students learn how to learn, which is similar to the video that David demoed, that first one that was directed toward learners themselves. And this ability for learners to understand their own strategies for learning is critical to their ongoing language development and second language acquisition. Lastly, we really want to open up the user interface, which is the online platform and the way that learners interact with the digital tool itself, so that LinguaFolio Online is more flexible and allows for more dynamic points of entry. Currently, learners have to first set their goals and then upload evidence. So our new approach would retain this flow, but also allow learners to have evidence that they want to showcase and start there with their piece of evidence and then select can-do statements that accompany that piece of evidence. In addition, we'd like for the platform to allow for learners to reflect and think about new learning strategies and how a piece of evidence may or may not fit a learning strategy that they have been trying and working with. So these enhancements will map more accurately onto the new framework that Ryan discussed previously. And of course, these changes to the digital platform are aspirational goals. This is what we really would like to do with LinguaFolio Online, and we're committed to working with you all to identifying which changes to the online version of the platform would be most supportive of the underlying goals of LinguaFolio. And we're also committed to working with you all on identifying and applying for funding sources that could support the work that would be required to make these changes. And I believe that ties us into Ruta's topic, who is next. Is that right, Ryan?
Yes, thank you, Mandy. I think you were explained very well what the vision is of this committee and how we hope the technology will support that vision. So, of course, we have the tried and true traditional route of asking for grants, and we have been looking at them. But as you know, it's not always that easy to find the right grant for the right amount of money for the right amount of time to do all of this. So we feel that we should try concurrently two ways of getting funding for this project. One is to, of course, continue looking for grants. The other one is, while we're doing that, why not try something and go somewhere where Necessful has never gone before? Perhaps we could envision a fundraising on the side, and we looked at different options, and it seems that the GoFundMe platform is probably the way to go. So who would we tap? Well, if we go to the next slide, we'll show you who we plan to tap. We have made a list, and it will be open to the Necessful membership to add to that list. We basically went online and tried to find how many celebrities that we can find that speak at least one other language. And here are some of them that you will recognize. We've gotten up to about 60, 65. Some of them are athletes, some of them are actors and actresses, some of them are comedians. And so we are in the process of drafting a letter, and we will be sending this letter to different celebrities. Of course, this is not an exhaustive list, and if the membership agrees with this this adventure, then perhaps those of you who have a few minutes to spare could look at the list that we have already on Google Drive and add to it. We don't know if this is going to be successful or not, but we're looking at raising between $150,000 and $200,000 for the online platform. Of course, the documents that that we talked about earlier that would be free on the Necessful website, the price is right. We're all doing that gratis. This is all done by the people in the committee. So we're really looking at three different things that were going on here. We're writing these documents, which are almost finished. And then Stephanie is writing the scripts for them. We have, and she's also enlisted a Castle's intern to help us record some of them, because we found that the rather robotic voice that David talked about, computer voice, was not very engaging. So, and so the biggest ticket item here is the online platform. And while we are happy to provide the free resources on the site, we know that in today's world, learners are going to be really looking at that online platform. So this is our hope, and in a few minutes we'll open the discussion, and we're going to ask for your feedback, comments, suggestions, etc. I think that's, so the next slide. I'm going to invite Helga to monitor this discussion. Lisa, how will this work? Can we, since there are only 15 of us, can we unmute people so that they can actually talk without having to type a lot in the chat group, box? Is that an option?
We can do that, or you can have people raise their hand and I can unmute them as their hand goes up.
Okay, why don't we do that? If you have a comment, question, suggestion, just hit the raise your hand button, and Lisa will give you the floor so that we can have a discussion. Thank you.
And Ruta, I would ask everyone to please identify themselves when they raise their hand. Yes. Since we have so many new members, we may not recognize everyone's voice.
Correct, that is correct.
Great. Thank you to the LinguaFolio committee for all the hard work that they've done so far. This is Helga Fasciano. And also, everything that you've seen here has been work that has been done in between everybody else's schedules. So it's pretty fantastic to see how far this has come, especially in looking at the whole revisioning process. So I hope I have done enough of a filibuster. Lisa, do we have any questions yet?
So right now we have one hand raised. So Ophelia, I have unmuted you.
Okay.
That's okay, Lisa. I think that was leftover from before.
Ah, okay. Michelle Aoki, I have unmuted you.
Okay.
Michelle, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Yes, actually, Michelle.
Okay.
So are you waiting for some
comments or questions? Yes.
Oh, I see. I have my hand raised because of the other question, but I will lower it. No, I'm really super excited to see this direction. I completely support keeping the name LinguaFolio associated with it, but the personalized learning, it's a little longer, but it's better. You know, it's a clearer statement of what it is. I really see some potential for rolling it out. I really like making the non-electronic resources. I mean, like not LinguaFolio online can't be free because it needs storage and all that kind of stuff. But, you know, those other tools and resources out of the goodness of everyone's heart and accessible to get those ready and available is a fantastic contribution in my view. So thank you all for doing all that.
Thank you for those words, Michelle. It means a lot.
Okay, next up we have Tom. Tom, I've unmuted you.
Thanks. This is Tom Welch. I'm in Chicago. And I, first of all, want to say thank you. This new version looks great. I'm very glad to hear the comments that make me think that you're not substituting personalized responding for the term personalized learning when it comes to LinguaFolio. It really does look like we're getting ready to be able to really get away from a linear curriculum that kids have to follow and let them set their own goals. So my comment with that is, what are your current thoughts about the professional development that is going to be so vital to help teachers and others actually take advantage of that?
Tom, thank you for being our visionary as always. And that actually is a question that we've presently put on the back burner simply because of all of the meat that needs to go into the revamping of the current tool. However, having said that, I am sure that some of our folks have had some thoughts about that. So, Ruta, would you like to take a moment and make a comment about any discussion that has been to date regarding future professional development with this tool?
Sure. As you said, right now we are on a time crunch to get all these documents ready, especially for those that need to be put in the animation and all that. But of course, Tom is absolutely right. We can't launch this tool and expect that people will just know how to use it. I think those of us who have been close to this process in the early years, and then if we look at what happened with the original tool, I think that was we would all acknowledge that that was a mistake. That while we did have some training, and I don't mean to poo-poo any of the things that we did, but we found out the hard way that what we did wasn't enough. And, we had the modules in North Carolina, we had, numerous presentations at ACFO, but I think this is where, again, this will be a successful project, and that once we have the new platform ready, and as we come to the end stages of that platform and the documents, this is something that we should start thinking about as soon as possible. And it may be that another committee will want to take this on. It may be that some of the members of the current committee will continue working. I'm hoping that'll be a little bit of both. But I think what we need to, again, just as we're offering this as a platform for lots of autonomy for learners, whatever we come up with should be also a means for all teachers to have access. And, I don't have any particular clout on the committee, except that I would say that we need to look at innovative ways of doing this so that teachers don't necessarily have to go to a conference or to a face-to-face meeting, that we have to create some platforms, webinars, whatever they may be, where teachers can take these the big picture and the different chunks of this new vision and try it out, like something a little bit like TEL. I remember when TEL first came out, I was impressed with the message that was sent out to teachers. You don't have to do it all of a sudden, work on one of the domains. And I think that's the message that probably we will, after much discussion, we might want to do that. Tom, if you have any specific suggestions, we're all ears, but I think we have to have, this is
Allie. One of the things that I've been thinking about is, when we think of the seal of biliteracy and how that has caught on, I think the state coordinators have a huge role in this, and the state organizations themselves, as well as the regional conferences. If we could find some way to really offer the kind of support that we had, like tie in somehow with the literacy, with seal of biliteracy, using LinguaFolio as one venue for evaluating where you are, getting the learner obviously into the self-regulation mode, but using that as a venue to make it a more successful thing to obtain the seal of biliteracy, but also to get a tree within the state coordinators, the successful state coordinators and those that are, important folks that are the decision makers in the states, to kind of do that same kind of effort.
And this is Ryan, if I can jump in. I just wanted to say, with all of the various platforms for learning management that are out there, there's certainly no reason that as we're developing workshop and training sessions and so forth, that we can't also be creating some type of an online course or webinar that our learning facilitators can access whenever they'd like to begin learning about how to implement LinguaFolio. I hope that's something that we're all thinking about. And Tom, I'm just really pleased to hear you note that you picked up on the committee's strong commitment to learners learning language anytime, anywhere, by any means. We are truly trying to practice what we preach when it comes to learner autonomy. We've been moving in that direction for many years. I would argue that we're finally getting there.
And Tom, you're self-muted, but if you wanted to add back in, I know you had typed a comment in the comment box, but feel free to wrap that up now before we go to the next person.
Oh, Ryan, I certainly did note it, and I also wanted to applaud what Allie was saying. She hit it right on the head. It really is interesting. I would gladly be on a committee to help with professional development, but not traditional. We need a group that will help with traditional development, but we also need one that is more forward-looking, that doesn't depend on traditional implementation at the classroom level. So anyway, it's looking really good. I think we could network with a lot of other networks that are promoting autonomous learning, self-directed learning, personalized learning, and kind of make them come to the table with us and say, hey, if you're promoting this at your school or whatever, then we want to work with you to show you and help you actually have your kids implement it. And then also a whole thing for kids who aren't connected to any school but want to do it, or aren't particularly connected to a class and want to advance their language learning.
This is really great, Tom, because one of the things when we're looking at the platform itself and how much funding that we could potentially garner through the GoFundMe idea, as well as any other ideas that any of you may have, it would be great that if the platform could create more of an interactive type of feel to it, so that as learners are there, that they have an opportunity to ask questions, and that there be some way built in that those questions go out to whomever, or others can jump in, so that we go beyond exactly what you were saying. By the same token, in a recent conversation that I know that Anne-Marie and I were in with some of our folks in North Carolina, they're still hungry for something like this that they could, kind of take and go with. So I think it's been duly noted that we need to look at all types of learning and all situations and how this tool could be used, for sure. So thank you for those great comments.
Okay, next hand up is Kathleen Skinner. Kathleen,
Thank you. I have been very excited about what I heard today, about the changes you've made to the portfolio, as well as to the ideas of offering it to every student, the access being available to those who are in traditional classrooms, as well as those who are in different learning situations, and giving the students the autonomy. I think that's really the where we're going with finding motivation and encouraging motivation. I want to let you all know we really do need professional development. To keep that in mind, we're struggling with our teachers. We have a lot who are emergency certified and alternatively certified here in Oklahoma that really don't have a background in second language acquisition or an understanding of how to make a classroom function. And so I'm starting at square one with my professional development of looking at just planning And this is a really great tool then to facilitate that, as well as then to turn them to that direction. But I can foresee that the district, that at the state level, we will be in a key positions to help facilitate this throughout the states and throughout the U.S. But I really need support in making this happen.
So if I understand what you're saying is, first of all, thank you for the feedback that this is something that you could use. But if I'm hearing you, you're saying that this is a tool that at the state level really could make a difference in terms of supporting the teachers and making sure that they do understand how to utilize these strategies and how to move their students along that continuum of acquiring language.
Right.
Okay.
And Helga, if I could jump in, this is
Yes.
Ryan. I think this is where a kind of train the trainer model needs to be discussed. I think first of all, we have to have buy-in by our Necessful membership, especially by those members who may be relatively new to the organization and relatively new to promoting something like LinguaFolio and autonomous language learning at the state level. If our members believe in what we're doing and see the value in it, and we can share the information and the excitement that we have about this, and they in turn can then perhaps turn to their state organizations and do some capacity building there, this is perhaps how we could really reach out in a more extensive way to reach a lot of people. And this is something that we have kind of failed to do in the past. I mean, we've always offered sessions at national and regional conferences, and some of us have even presented on LinguaFolio at our state conferences, but we've kind of not loosened the reins and let go of the total traditional manner of presenting LinguaFolio. And I think Tom's point of finding other ways to disseminate the information, but ensuring that that dissemination is accurate and useful to our stakeholders.
If I can jump in here, Ryan, this is Allie. It was interesting what Ms. Skinner just said about using it with her alternatively certified teachers, because one of the dissertations that one of my doctoral students, Coate, did, he looked at what impact did LinguaFolio have on teachers and their teaching, and they became much more learner-centered, because the whole thing is, of course, based on creating learning tasks that allow for personalized learning, and of course the ability to really plan lessons that engage them fully in the act of reflecting upon their own learning process. So that's interesting, and I think more and more our states are seeing the kind of alternative certification grow in their states. I think that's a really interesting point, and I think this might be an interesting venue for these folks to be able to get an understanding of some of the basic foundational concepts of SLA and in that manner. I thought that was a really interesting point.
I think when we look at Allie's research, it would really be interesting if we looked at this next version of LinguaFolio and tried to pair that with an approach to helping teachers that reflected that personalized nature. I'm really not convinced that train the trainer is a good model, because it kind of assumes that everybody comes in at the same place and that they go at the same time. But if we did something that was even a very stripped down version of can-do statements for teachers helping kids implement the new LinguaFolio approach, we might find it, just like Allie found with her research, that it's much more effective for actually causing the type of learning that we're hoping comes about for teachers as well as learners.
Absolutely. Tom, I concur. Yeah. You've got to model. And the LinguaFolio committee is probably tired of hearing me say we've got to model. We've got to include modeling. We've got to, whatever we do, it's got to go beyond talking about it. We've actually got to practice what we preach.
Right. So I think all of this discussion brings me back to the revisioning that has occurred and the hard work that's going into creating those documents for the learner, but then also for the learning facilitator. So what I'm hearing is that this is an opportunity for us to bring this back to the committee, but then also bring it back to the membership and have membership take a deep dive into some of those teacher documents to see if this is getting to what they think might be able to help, and that maybe some of the presentations and or the training to those educators that are facilitating this learning would then be able to utilize these documents to help them to understand or to bring that understanding to their stakeholders to move forward with this. This is very fluid. I still remember a presentation I heard Tom do many, many years ago, that this learning ebbs and flows, and you've got to allow that learning to occur at a time, a place, and a manner that's going to be meaningful to that learner in order for them to be able to propel and move forward. So we've got some great opportunities, but I really think based on this conversation that we are on the right path with this whole revisioning process. Great. Lisa, do we have someone else?
We do. We have
This is
several more questions.
Okay.
So I'm going to have Michelle Aoki up first, followed by Margaret Peterson. You put your hand back down, so I don't know. Did you still have that same question? So Michelle, then Margaret, and then Faye. So Michelle, you are unmuted.
So yeah, of course, my thoughts are going crazy just thinking about ways to really take this out and kind of as a new effort in our state. I did a lot of workshops and all when I first joined Accessible and LinguaFolio was just rolling out around our state as a state supervisor. But I think I agree with what has been said. We needed practitioners. I needed examples of teachers who were really using it effectively. So we've actually created a new structure within our World Language Association, WAFL, in Washington. Because we, as part of our, in Washington, we had the world language credit testing that students could earn credits for languages they know 1 to 4. And then once we introduced the seal, if they could earn 4 credits that way, they could qualify for the seal of biliteracy. So we teach many, many less commonly taught languages. We test many less commonly taught languages throughout our state. And our state supervisor's office, when the staffing was cut down, asked Waffle to take on the role of continuing to coordinate that, which has basically been me. But now we have a testing team with a teacher that is retiring in June, myself and Paris Granville, who is at Bellevue School District and was also a former state supervisor. So we are looking at models for building capacity in our World Language Association to go out and do the on-site support, not the support to do the testing, but all of that cajoling and encouragement and information and everything they need in order for smaller districts that have not been doing the credit testing to be empowered to do it. So we could easily add to our WAFL testing team, because it's not really just testing, it's a broader sense of assessment, work with LinguaFolio, I think, and we're getting other teachers, especially people who are close to retirement, to help join our cadre as something for us to really help support around the state. And so I'm looking forward to sharing this with them. One specific place where I really want it, because we've already been using LinguaFolio ever since we started the credit testing, particularly to help students who have a home language where there's a big difference in their, say, speaking ability and their reading and writing skills, to have specific can-do vision of where they need to go in terms of writing. And we've given them tasks that we've gotten from Castles, for example, and so on. And so I think we could really work a lot with those students, especially when they're isolated, the Samoan speaker who happens to be in a small district someplace, or the Marshallese speaker or Tigrinya speaker or whatever, so that we have tools to give those sites to help encourage those students to develop their writing skills so the students would qualify for the seal of biliteracy. So that's sort of a specialized application, different from our traditional world language classes, but it's something that we're already doing in kind of a kludgy way, and I think the new tools and resources could make it more elegant and more effective. So thank you.
So to summarize, what you're seeing here is an opportunity to actually cherry pick from the new framework to meet the needs of the learner at where they are.
Yes, I would. That's exactly the point, because because anybody that studied a language longer than about a year is going to be all over the map anyway. There are going to be those that just, went sped ahead in terms of reading, maybe writing, but not so much in speaking or interpersonal speaking. And then we have our typical heritage speakers who are generally strong in speaking and listening, but weak in reading and writing. Sometimes they're pretty strong in reading even, but they just haven't done enough writing. So it just allows us to have a much better idea of how to coach them in the areas where they most need attention. And that would go for our dual language immersion students too, many of whom
Absolutely.
basically become ex post facto heritage speakers like by the time they're high school, because they go off in their own directions, but they have an ownership and identification with the language that's totally different from students who just started as a world language later in their lives.
All right. Thank you so much, Michelle, for those thoughtful comments. So who is next? Margaret,
Hi,
I believe.
this is Margaret Peterson.
Hi,
Are you able
Margaret.
to hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Okay, great. Thank you for this exciting conversation. I remember when LinguaFolio came out a number of years ago, and it's exciting to see this new direction that it's going in. I particularly appreciate the autonomy of the students and the students taking ownership of the language, and I appreciate all of the comments that I've heard heretofore. I did want to mention that California adopted new world languages standards in January of this year, and we had a very successful rollout of. It was sort of, we don't want to use the word trainer of trainers model, and I like the point that was made earlier. It cannot be a one size fits all. It needs to be differentiated according to the needs of the teacher learner who is there. We used a metacognitive model where we were looking at a potential presentation that could be used, but then it was unpacked for any different audience that we were going to bring that presentation to. So we had site leaders from all of the California World Language projects from all over the state, plus their team members come together so that we could be on the same page with how we were rolling this out statewide. And I would love to use our resources and expertise with the California World Language Project to help roll out the LinguaFolio. So when you guys have a professional development team, please include me. I'm happy to, and I'm glad that Michelle mentioned the Seal of Biliteracy, because I'm interested in hearing more about the link for how LinguaFolio can be used on the path to the Seal of Biliteracy, in that pathway.
Thank you so much, Margaret. And Margaret, would you indicate where you are? Because I think some of our folks may not know where you are located in California.
Yeah, I'm at Stanford University in the Graduate School of Education, and I'm the executive director of the California World Language Project, running, and everyone knows Duarte. I'm Duarte's successor.
So we certainly welcome you. I think the good news is to our LinguaFolio team that we have 3 so far that have indicated they would love to help with the professional development. So that's wonderful. And I think we still want to hear from Faye.
Okay, I'm unmuting Faye now, and then after Faye, we have Ophelia.
Okay, thank you.
This is Faye Rollins-Carter. I may be repeating some of the things that I've heard, but I think the one thing that we do want to focus on, and I agree with Tom in this, we don't necessarily want to do a train the trainer. However, in some locations, many areas still do follow that, and will have certain professional developments that they have all of their teachers required to attend. And from there, then they go back out either as department chairs, supervisors, or whatever into other localities. So we do have to consider that. But that we've already seen. People that are excited about it and interested are going to show up wherever it is to learn something about it. I think what we also need to focus on, too, as another option, both in the teacher and in the learner category, and figure out how to do it differently, is that you have some people that are so new that they don't know anything really about LinguaFolio. They may not have been present at the successful presentations at ACTFL, and they may not have learned about it in a formal situation, either in a county or statewide professional development. So they're not going to go out and get excited to learn something else when they could very well be overwhelmed with a whole lot on their plates right now. So we have to come up for that group with something that is so in their face and easy they can't say no. In other words, they can look at it, whether it is the webinars and the Go Animate things that we're developing for the different cycles, goals and strategies, or whether it is an additional, possibly short webinar or multiple short webinars that they can look at very quickly on their own time and can't come up with an excuse for not really wanting to be a part of it. And I think we do have to look at those two, the excited group that we know we can bring on board and the group that doesn't know they could be excited yet because they have not allowed themselves the time to learn enough about it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Faye. And I know we're getting onto our time limit here, so let's go ahead and go to Ophelia.
Well, first of all, thank you for a very wonderful last hour and a half. I want to thank Ruta, Ryan, and the entire committee for the thorough preparation that has obviously went into providing us this very, very informative session and a very well-structured webinar. And also for giving us the opportunity to have the participants engage in such rich conversations. I am thrilled, as the others are, to see the visionary updates that are projected for LinguaFolio, but I was even more thrilled to sit back and listen to the richness of ideas that have been shared today with regards to next steps. So kudos to you, LinguaFolio committee, and I think your work is cut out for you after this webinar. Thank you so much, and also to the participants who have shared such incredibly rich and exciting ideas. Thank you.
Thank you, Ophelia, for those wonderful words. And I do echo, we really do appreciate the feedback and the interaction of those that signed on to either learn more about it or to find out what the revisions were all about. And it does take a village. And one thing that has been consistent about Necessful is that it is an incredible group of professionals, and everything we do as a common ground has always been of the highest quality and of great use to our stakeholders out in the field. So it's nice to see that tradition continue. At this point, I'm going to turn things back over to Ryan to wrap things up, and then Lisa, thank you so much for facilitating today.
All right, thank you, Helga, and thank you all. I want to echo the very kind words that Ophelia just shared with us. We're very, very appreciative of all of your input today. And I want to invite you, both Ruta and I want to invite you to continue to share your input and ideas with us. Your sharing is not limited just to this afternoon session. If you're like me, you're going to probably get in your car and drive home now, or maybe you're going to finish out the rest of your workday, and our conversations are going to be at the forefront of your mind. And as you're thinking about things, other ideas might come to mind. We invite you at any time you have an idea or a concern, or you think of something that you think is vital for the committee to contemplate, to send that our way by emailing us, calling us, texting us, however you want to get them, smoke signals if you don't have any other means. We're happy to take your feedback anytime. I mentioned earlier that the power of LinguaFolio is only as great as the combination of brains that go into its revitalization, and with all of your participation, it can only get better and better. So, to not take any more of your time this afternoon, as we've got about a minute left, thank you all for attending. We're very appreciative of all of today's panelists. So I'd like to thank Allie, Mandy, Jackie, Helga, David, Ruta, for all of your work in helping us to put this together today. I don't think I missed anyone. And also just to our membership for taking the time out of a busy stretch to spend an hour and a half with us this afternoon, listen to what we had to share, and to share your thoughts and opinions, which we do truly value so much. Thank you all, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you, Ryan.
And thank you to the entire LinguaFolio team for a very rich and productive presentation and broadcast today. In our last minute, I will share just a couple of the comments that have been coming across from Helen Small in Virginia. A big thank you to the committee and the panelists, stating this has been very informative and she's very excited about the new direction that LinguaFolio is taking. From Kathleen Skinner, I thank you for all of your hard work. From Margaret Peterson, again, a thank you and expressing a wish to participate in the professional development side when it comes forward. And there are several other comments as well, which we will make available to the LinguaFolio team. So as you prepare to sign off, we do remember that this video session has been recorded, and we will make it available on the Successful member site in approximately 1 week. So thank you all again for joining us. Best wishes for a pleasant weekend.
Thanks, Lisa.
Yes, thank you for your facilitation today. We appreciate it.
And it looks like just about everybody has departed. I see Anne-Marie and Ophelia, greetings. I hope that you all are going to be enjoying a very pleasant weekend and that you'll have some time to relax a little bit. And Ryan, I hope you also do. Jackie, see you're still on, so best wishes to you as well. You guys have a great weekend. I'm going to go ahead and end the broadcast.